Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at redistricting in the state of California. I released a video last week detailing how Republicans might redraw Texas in order to gain a more advantageous map for them and net them more seats in the 2026 midterms. California may counter that. So I'm here to tell you what it means. It's going to be a pretty complicated process, and it's really an interesting game happening here between Democrats and Republicans. And there's a lot of both legal and like electoral nuts and bolts to this, so we're going to get right into it. Actually, one thing I do want to quickly say is my apologies for not posting the past week. I had a cold, so it was kind of hard for me to talk, but we're going to go back to the normal upload schedule hopefully very soon after I'm recovering, or after I fully recover from this. But let's start with Texas. So I'd encourage you to watch the video I put out last week. It's, I think, 12 minutes long, and I talk about what Republicans are likely to do here. But what's happening is, and this is just a brief summary, but again, watch the video if you're interested. Republicans right now have a pretty favorable map in Texas. This is already a gerrymandered map, as you can probably tell by looking at it. But they can definitely go further. And knowing what they now know based on 2024 data and 2022 data, the GOP can absolutely draw a map that gets them at least 2, 3, maybe 4 to 5 more seats. And that would be pretty big for them because right now, or in the last election, Democrats were 3 seats away from majority. The consensus is that in the 2026 midterms, Democrats are going to win back the majority. So getting even 3 or 4 more seats in Texas in a polarized climate like this, when you're kind of an underdog, that can be a really big morale boost, and also a really good way to kind of cut your losses or potentially bring the majority back into play. Donald Trump, I think, recognizes this as the Republican president, and he's reportedly asked Texas Republicans to redraw. And so, obviously, it's pretty unprecedented. You almost rarely have mid-decade redistricting unless a court orders it. So, for example, in the 2010s, we saw states like Pennsylvania and North Carolina, they had to redraw their maps because their maps were ruled to be illegal by the Supreme Court. But almost never do we see states just decide to redraw their maps, for no reason other than to draw more favorable maps for their party. And it's pretty unprecedented. And obviously, both parties gerrymander. Look at Democrats, what they've done in Illinois, for example. Look at what Republicans have done in Florida and to an extent Texas already, but this is kind of taking it up a notch. So, it's certainly a new thing to watch. But regardless, just to kind of show how they can do this in Texas, Republicans can absolutely. There are 2 marginal Democratic seats in the Rio Grande Valley with Cuellar and Gonzalez. These are 2 seats that Democrats, in the past had won by really big margins. They're trending red rapidly. Republicans can easily draw out Gonzalez. Cuellar is a little trickier, but it can absolutely be done. And these are 2 seats that I think could be gone. There's definitely another room for a Republican district in Houston. Democrats only won the 7th by 21 or by 22% in 2024, and then they also only won Sylvia Garcia's district by around 30 points, which is lower than it was in 2020. So Republicans have a bit more room to work here. In Harris County, Houston, which trended right in 2024. So I think Republicans can gain a seat there. And then they might look for another seat in Dallas, but that could be tricky because Beth Van Doyne, who's in the 24th district, which is broadly a little bit left trending, it didn't get that close in 2024, but in 2020 it moved to the left by a good amount. Beth Van Doyne's seat is a bit of a concern for them just in terms of how aggressive they can be over here. But Republicans can probably draw out one of these 3 Democratic incumbents. It would probably be easier for them to draw out Greg Kasar, just because of the nature of his district kind of stretching from San Antonio to Austin. But I think Republicans, the most realistic outcome is they get 3 or 4 seats out of this. 2 in the Rio Grande Valley, 1 in Houston, then maybe 1 in in Austin or Dallas. But obviously, or not Austin or Dallas, Austin or San Antonio. And Dallas is a maybe, but that's to me, excuse me, that's kind of a question mark to me, just to be completely honest here. Really sorry, as you can tell, my voice is not where it needs to be. And then Ohio, this is an easier one for Republicans. Democrats right now hold 2 very competitive seats. Literally, the 9th district, Marcy Copter won by less than 1%, and then the 13th district was decided by 2%. These are seats that can easily be drawn out, and I think Republicans are going to shore up Greg Landsman and just kind of draw a Cincinnati-based seat here. So Democrats will get a safer district down here, but they're going to lose most likely these 2 seats. So Democrats could be looking at losing 5 to 6, maybe even 7 seats just from redistricting in these 2 states. And there are reports Republicans might redraw in Missouri. Those reports are a lot less strong. There's been some, other information that suggests Republicans are kind of hesitant to do that. But for now, I think the most likely outcome is that Republicans redraw in Ohio and Texas, and we'll see if they can do something in Missouri or Indiana. But I think Ohio and Texas is what I'd bet on right now. So that's, say Democrats lose 6 seats, which is probably the mid to high end of that. That would be bad for them, really bad for them, because the House, I think, is going to be pretty close in 2026, even if Democrats start out as narrow favorites. And so Democrats, there's a couple of states where they've kind of like disarmed themselves, like in New York, there's a commission there, and Democrats, unless they can get voters to eliminate that commission, or for the legislature to eliminate that commission, Democrats in New York can be stuck with not being able to draw those lines. And then Maryland is entirely controlled by Democrats, but there's a conservative Supreme Court because those judges on that court have been appointed by Republican Governor Larry Hogan. So Maryland Democrats could, in theory, pass a map in the legislature, and it could just get chucked out by the court. And that would only be 1 seat anyways. And then maybe Democrats in Oregon could try to draw out the 2nd district, but that would be really difficult just because Oregon's not as blue as, California or Washington. And so Democrats, like, their only option here is to me, California. And I think Democrats are kind of bluffing right now. They've threatened to redraw in Illinois, in Minnesota, but in Minnesota, there's basically everything I've read indicates that there's no pathway for Democrats to do that in Minnesota because they don't even have majority in the legislature right now. So they can't, they don't have the votes in the legislature to approve new maps. In Illinois, Democrats can maybe redraw, but I mean, this is arguably the most Democratic gerrymandered state in the country. Like, just if you look at these districts, I mean, they're so. Democrats can maybe squeeze out one more district, like the 16th or the 15th, but at the end of the day, I mean, these are seats that are just so already. Democrats are already getting a ton of value out of Illinois. It's going to be difficult for them. So that leaves California. In California, a lot of people like to say this is already a Democratic gerrymander. It was drawn by a commission that was, I think, more Democratic leaning because California is a blue state. But at the end of the day, I don't view this map as being super gerrymandered. I would say it's probably a bit more Democratic leaning. Like, if I were in charge of drawing maps in every state in the country, and my goal is to be as fair as possible, I'd probably give Republicans, I think, a bit better of a map in California. But California right now is not, to me, as gerrymandered as a lot of people think it is, just because Democrats took away their ability to draw the line. So this is where it gets interesting, and I want you to listen up because this is a really weird dynamic that Democrats are going to have to play into. So right now, the rule in California is, and this was approved by voters via referendum, in California, an independent commission draws the lines. So it's some Republicans, they're registered, Democrats, they're registered, and they draw the maps. And so that happens every 10 years, because every 10 years we have the census and we draw a new congressional district, right? The argument from California Democrats is that, and this is the easiest way they can go about drawing new lines, is that the commission is legally allowed to draw, they have the jurisdiction to draw lines every 10 years when the census is released. What Gavin Newsom and some Democrats are trying to argue is that they can draw the lines in mid-decade redistricting because the state constitution, as worded, does not say anything about mid-decade redistricting, and Democrats, who currently hold supermajorities in both the upper and lower houses of the legislature in California, have the votes to, in theory, if most Democrats are on board, they can say, look, we're going to redraw the lines until 2030, and then the commission's going to draw the lines for 2030, and then, in theory, we could just redraw the lines whenever we want in the middle of the decade if we want to get a bluer map. So that's a, that is a really risky legal argument. I don't have a law degree, so I can't tell you how that would fare in court. My guess is it would be tough, even though California courts are pretty liberal, just based on appointments by Democratic governors. So that's one route. The other route, which is probably easier, even though it's more complicated, is Democrats in California would have to get a supermajority in the legislature to put a referendum on the ballot for November of 2025. So it'd be November of this year. And that referendum would be to overturn the commission. And if the commission's overturned, then you're in the same situation as Texas, where the legislature can, in theory, draw lines at any moment. And so California is a blue state, but obviously gerrymandering is a pretty unpopular thing among voters in both parties. And so a lot of people assume that California would immediately pass, like the California voters would just get on board with getting rid of the commission. But it's pretty hard to say, we want to gerrymander our state. Please let us gerrymander our state. That's a difficult election to win. So a lot of it would come down to messaging. But I do think it's what's going to have to happen because California Democrats, I think, recognize that, or at least based on what I've read, California Democrats recognize that it's going to be difficult to argue in court that based on a pretty tight interpretation of the state constitution that you can redraw, that the legislature still has the ability to redraw mid-decade. So California to me is less of a sure thing than Texas or Ohio, just because there's more steps that need to happen. But I do think that given that Democrats have 75% majorities in both chambers of the legislature, and given that I think they'd probably be narrowly favored to win or to overturn the commission via referendum if it came to that, I think you could see California redraw. And that's only if, obviously, Gavin Newsom said he'll kind of put the gun down if Texas and Ohio don't redraw. But if Texas and Ohio do indeed redraw, as most signs are pointing to, I think California is pretty easy for Democrats to gerrymander. California is a state where Republicans do not have great political geography. And what I mean by that is like Republican votes are concentrated very inefficiently. Go to a state like Wisconsin, the Republican votes are concentrated all over the state. They are consistently getting 60% of the vote everywhere. There aren't a ton of parts of Wisconsin that are super red, but there's not a ton of parts of Wisconsin that are like 0% red. And Republicans, if you look at most counties or most areas, it's like 60 to 65% Republican, then you have the deep blue cities. And that allows Republicans to draw pretty favorable districts for themselves without it getting too crazy. I mean, this isn't a great map, as you can see, but Democrats only hold 2 out of 8 states and 2 out of 8 seats in Wisconsin just because their geography there is so bad and Republican geography is so good. In California, Republicans don't have it that great. They have a ton of areas like in Orange County or in North Los Angeles where they get 40% of the vote, and then Democrats can draw them into districts that are like Democrats win by 15 to 20 points. You can do that so many times. And so I think if Democrats drew a map of California, they could probably get rid of, Republicans hold 9 seats, they could get rid of easily 5 or 6 of them. And that would basically cancel out what Texas and Ohio do. So that would be pretty dangerous, just for Republicans, I think. And by the way, these are politicians, right? Like, do you think that David Valadao wants to get drawn out in California? Do you think that, Ken Calvert or Young Kim want to lose their seats in Congress because their friends in Texas or Ohio are kind of going aggressive and forcing the Democratic Party's hand? I'm not sure. And I think it's going to cause a lot of kind of backlash among like the GOP caucus if California does redraw, because it will have been as a response to what Texas and Ohio are doing. So, I think objectively this whole process isn't a great sign for most Americans, because I think gerrymandering is already a problem, and we already deal with it once out of every 10 years. Doing it in the middle of the decade to even gerrymander even more is certainly a concern. But then also what you have is, at a certain point, the question has to be asked: at what point will politicians stop, to win? And so it's a real concern that I have, and I don't say that as a partisan, because I think, the process in Texas or Ohio or California would be really bad either way. But I guess the takeaway from this video that wasn't the case last week is that Democrats seem to be ready to respond, at least in California. In other states, I'm not so sure. But in California, Democrats, I think, can absolutely, they have a 50 to 60% chance of being able to respond. And that could be really devastating for House Republicans who still hold 9 seats in California. So, let me know what you think about all of this. Let me know if there's any other states that you think could redistrict. For now, I think the most likely are by far Ohio, Texas, and California. But as I always say, we'll see. And with that, I will see you all next video.